This is why you should never leave your house unlocked. Part 1. When I was about 12 years old, I lived in Kansas. Both my parents were out and I was home alone with my 2 dogs. I was sitting in my bedroom playing on my computer when I heard the very distinct sound of the front door open and close, like someone had just come in. My dogs got up and ran into the living room, and so I just assumed my parents were home. I shouted for my mum to confirm this and heard no response. I paused my game and walked out into the living room to see, and as I did, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had heard someone come in, clear as day, but no one was there. I wasn't wearing headphones and I'd had the computer volume turned down, so I knew it couldn't have been the game. I tried calling my parents, but neither of them picked up, so for the first time in my life, I called the police. This is why you should never leave your house unlocked. Part 2. I explained the situation to the 911 operator, and she told me that police were on their way. I stood there rooted to the spot, and not long after my parents got home. The police arrived shortly after, and told us that thieves usually wait until homeowners leave, check the door, and if it's unlocked, they go in and take valuables. They checked the house, but found no one. They said whoever it was probably left when they heard that someone was home. They told us to make sure that we lock the doors, but not to worry too much. Not long after it happened, I told the story to one of my friends, and he said, "You only heard the door once. That means they were most likely already in the house. You just heard them leave." This is why you should never try using a Ouija board. My friends and I decided to play with a Ouija board after work in our office and spoke to a girl named Quinn. She didn't say much but seemed friendly enough, but when I mentioned my girlfriend, she got super mad and protective of me. When it got to 2 a.m, we said goodbye to her, but about a week later, in the middle of the night, the office block that we worked in burnt down. It creeped us all out, so a week later we used the Ouija board again near a lake and asked for Quinn. When we got through to her, we asked if she started the fire, to which she responded, yes. About 2 weeks later, I was driving to my girlfriend's house with the board in the back of the truck. I didn't know it at the time, but my girlfriend was in fact cheating on me. But I guess Quinn knew because I lost control of the truck and flipped it upside down. When the cops arrived to make sure I was okay, they reminded me what road I was on. Route 666, Virginia. You guys asked for it, here's another story time. One night, a woman was driving home late at night from dinner with some of her friends. As she was driving, she noticed a pair of headlights in her rearview mirror approaching the car. As this car pulled up behind her, she glanced and saw the driver switch the turn signal on, as if it was about to pass, before suddenly swerving back behind her and pulling up dangerously close to her, flashing its lights. The frightened woman struggled to keep her eyes on the road and finally turned onto the exit. Through every stoplight and turn, the car followed her, still flashing its lights until she pulled into her driveway. She figured her only hope was to make a dash into the house and call the police, but as she jumped out of the car, so did the driver of the car behind her, and he screamed, "Lock the doors and call 911. When the police arrived, it was revealed that as the man in the car had pulled up behind her, his headlights illuminated the car and he saw a silhouette of a man in the back seat reaching to grab the woman. Storytime. When I was a child, my family and I moved into a big old 2-story house. Both my parents worked, so I was often home alone when I came home from school. One evening when I came home, the house was still dark. I called out for my mum just in case she was home and heard her sing-song voice reply from upstairs. I called her again as I climbed the stairs to see which room she was in and again heard the same response. We were decorating the house at the time and I didn't quite know my way around the maze of rooms yet, but I knew she was in one of the far ones right down the hall. Just as I reached for the handle of the door to let myself in the room, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call out for me. I jumped back terrified and ran down the stairs to her, but as I glanced back, the door to the room slowly opened a crack, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something staring back at me. Was this a case of badly behaved children or something else? One morning, I was with my mum in the bathroom of our house while she was getting ready. She was acting a little distant, so I asked her if everything was okay, and she told me about something that had happened the night before. At about 2 a.m, she had been woken up by a strange noise, so she got up and went to see where it was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the bathroom, and as she walked in, she saw a hairdryer plugged in and turned on in the middle of the floor. She thought it was strange, but that it was probably just one of the kids, and went back to bed. About an hour later, she was woken up again by the same sound, but this time when she went to check, it was coming from downstairs. Once again, the hairdryer was in the middle of the floor, but this time in the downstairs bathroom. As she's telling me this story, I turn to look at the closet in her bathroom, and as I do, the entire light bulb smashes into pieces. Story time. My sister and I were staying in an old hotel in the middle of rural Montana. The building had been in use since the 1800s, and it was one of my sister's favourite places. But the night we stayed there, I was kept up all night by someone pacing around on the hardwood floor in the room above ours. The next morning, I asked my sister how she'd managed to get any sleep, and she said she hadn't heard a sound. Besides, the rooms above ours were carpeted and empty. The hotel staff confirmed this, and also mentioned that the upstairs of the building had once been used as an old ballroom. This house was so haunted, nobody could live there. In the 1870s, a family living in Surrency, Georgia, started experiencing terrifying paranormal activities in their home. They reported witnessing objects soaring across rooms, hearing laughter and crying, and seeing red eyes staring into their house. Food was thrown from their plates, and the utensils were twisted into unusable shapes. The townspeople speculated that these occurrences were cries for help from spirits who thought the family would be able to save them. On the day the family decided to finally leave the house, a fire iron allegedly floated up and started beating one of the sons in the head. No one was ever brave enough to live in the house again, and the building went up in flames in 1925. Story time. One evening, my wife and I had picked up our daughter from her friend Sally's birthday party. We brought her home and put her into bed. But later that night, after I'd gone to bed, I heard her come into our room. She came up to the edge of the bed and started pulling up my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm going to be next month," she said. "I don't know. How old?" I replied, still half asleep. She smiled at me and held up 4 fingers. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours, pleading with her, but she still refuses to tell us where she got them. Story time. My boyfriend and I bought a very old house. He was in charge of bringing in all the furniture and doing the heavy lifting, while I was on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner had papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it took ages, but was oddly satisfying, kind of like peeling skin when you get sunburnt. I started peeling the paper away and discovered that under a corner section of paper in every room was a person's name and a date. Curiosity got the better of me, and one night I googled the names. I discovered that the person was actually a missing person, and the missing date matched the date under the wallpaper. We immediately notified the police, and they sent out a crime scene team. After looking around a bit, they came up to me and said, "Where's the wallpaper you removed from the walls?" Turns out, it wasn't wallpaper. I'm done. Story time. When I was younger, I kept having the same repeating dream about an alleyway in the town where I live. It didn't exist in real life, but I kept getting really freaked out about it. One night, when I was having the same exact dream, a strange man in the alleyway told me I needed to go there. After a lot of persuading, the next day, me, my mum and my dad went into the city centre about 40 minutes away from us to try to find the alley. As we walked to the place in my dream, we noticed an alleyway going off the main path that we'd never noticed before. And down that alleyway, I saw the same creepy man that was in my dream. I still haven't told anyone about it because I know they wouldn't believe me, but I think about it every day. Story time. Every year my family is in charge of putting up the Christmas tree in our local church. Every year my grandpa would come and help until the year he sadly died. So, for the first time, me, my uncle, dad and little sister, who was 3 at the time, went to the church alone. The decorations for the tree are stored in the basement of the church, so we went to go and get them. To get into the basement, there are about 20 concrete steps going down into a dark room. But my little sister didn't know this and walked straight through the door and fell all the way down the concrete steps. My uncle and dad were obviously terrified she would have seriously injured herself, or even worse, and went running down after her. But when they found her, she was completely uninjured and unfazed. The scary part of the story is when my dad asked her if she was okay, she said, "Somebody caught me." And since then, we've always thought that my great-grandpa might have been with us all along. Don't listen to this if you get scared easily. Part 1. Growing up, I've always lived in houses where creepy stuff has happened, but this one was different. We signed a 12-month lease on a house, and the first 7 or 8 months were completely normal. But one day, my mum was carrying laundry upstairs when she swore she saw something in the corridor. She saw what she described as the Grim Reaper standing by the window in broad daylight. Ever since then, weird things started to happen, especially in my bedroom. Specific items of mine would go missing and then reappear a couple of days later in the middle of my bedroom floor. Then things started rolling around on the floor, and bear in mind I had no air conditioning or drafts in my room. And then one night I was woken up by a massive crash where my entire vanity fell to the floor but nothing broke. The only thing still standing was a candle which I'd lit the night before, which was the shape of a Virgin Mary.